All right. Hello, everyone. Let's go ahead and kick off and get started. I want to first, before we dive into fun science and some practical tips and tricks on how to take effective breaks, I'll briefly introduce myself. My name is Dr. Sahar Youssef. I am a cognitive neuroscientist and a faculty at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business. So I get to straddle a really fun world where I get to have one foot in biology still and one foot in the business world, and really trying to marry and bridge the two worlds together. So let's go ahead and dive into a sheer fact. A fact from a scientist. We are not designed to run like machines. And I think we all know that intuitively. We know that theoretically. But I want to actually talk about how humans really operate in the wild briefly for a second. Right? Wild. Oh, I didn't even realize wild session. Wild in the wild. Okay. Sorry. Bad jokes right from the start. We're not designed to run like machines, but really thinking about the ways in which animals, think of a lion or a tiger out in the wild, they oscillate very naturally between sprinting and hunting towards food, towards their goals and their objectives, and very intentional elongated periods of rest. There's this beautiful symphony of sprint and gas pedal and go, and this brake pedal that allows them to regain energy and reboot so that they can sprint and hunt again. But what do we as humans do instead? We are also made to sprint and go and rest, intentionally oscillating between these two modes. But what we end up doing is we work a little bit all of the time without intentional rest, because we tell ourselves, well, the sprinting isn't so hard. We're not sprinting towards, in the hunt. I'm just doing some emails. It's okay. It's really not using that much energy. Unfortunately, it is. I'm going to talk about the circadian rhythm briefly for a second. Our circadian rhythms, which I'm sure almost everyone here is familiar with, is our energy profile over the course of a 24-hour day. When you look at an entire day, 24 hours in a day, of course, the hours from 9 to 5 are not, they're not flatlined and even, but we have, of course, natural circadian rhythms that dictate when we should fall asleep, when we're awake, etc. Now, as you may notice, besides the sleep time and the wake time, we also have these smaller oscillations. It's not a flat line. And that's because over top of a circadian rhythm, we have what are called ultradian rhythms. Now, ultradian rhythms are based on what are called glucocorticoids. These are stress hormones in the brain and in the body. And approximately every 90 minutes or so, our brains and our bodies use up a lot of these really amazing hormones. Things like cortisol, which I know gets a bad rap, but as many of you know, are so deeply important for our ability to focus, be productive, pay attention, have energy and motivation. If we had low levels of cortisol perpetually, we would be practically comatose the entire day. We would be low motivation. We'd feel terrible. We'd feel like we're halfway into a nap at all times. Cortisol is not bad. I know it gets a bad rap, but it is good. We need a certain amount of it. And yes, there is a sweet spot. So too much is not great. Too little is not great. We're trying to hit this Goldilocks sweet spot at all times when it comes to cortisol and other glucocorticoids, e.g. stress hormones in the body and in the brain. Now, as I mentioned before, this is the original Kleitman curve. Now, as from the 80s, as we increase in arousal, physiological arousal using these glucocorticoids, so a little bit of cortisol, a little bit of adrenaline and epinephrine, we enter this high performance state. We feel excited, we feel motivated, we feel focused, like we can do stuff. And once we're there, we use up those hormones. Just like you filled a glass of water full of really great hormones or a cup of coffee full of great coffee, well, you go ahead and you drink it. You use up the stuff in the cup. And once you're using up that stuff in the cup, you're going to decrease in physiological arousal. We need to go into what's called an ultradian healing response, which is an absolutely silly research term for take a break, in order to remake all of those really good hormones again. And if we do not enter this ultradian healing response, I am here to tell you all, as a scientist, this next high performance peak will be less peaky. I am not here on behalf of the HR of the companies that you all work for. I'm not here to tell you for work-life sustainability reasons for you all to take a break. I'm here to say that if you care about your performance, your ability to make good decisions, your ability to parse data and information in an efficient manner without making mistakes, then you have to take a break. For performance reasons, we must take a break. And it's because of these glucocorticoids. We must allow our brains and our bodies to remake these things in order to enter another high performance state, in order to really ride the wave. That's kind of my theory on, my fun visualizable theory on the effective break taking, is that we have biological waves. Everything has oscillations in the biological world and in the physical world. We have to ride the wave as opposed to kind of going head first into the wave. Okay. Now, I want to go ahead and dive into the definition of a break, a true brain break, as I call it. The definition of a break, if you do in fact want to take a break so that you can, again, increase in those glucocorticoids so that you can be high performing again, is that you must stop processing information. I have this in all caps for a reason. Because why? What's not taking a break? Staying in your email inbox, scrolling through Instagram or LinkedIn to catch up on your feed, sending a text message to your sister, a friend, a loved one. Although technically, yes, it's not related to the work that you do for a living, it is still not taking a break. I actually gave a talk, this is pre-COVID, on site to a group of about 300 folks in a department. And the director, this really amazing woman, comes up to me afterwards and says, Sahar, that was really great. Really loved it. I think it resonated with everyone. And by the way, I like to think that I've been doing a lot of good role modeling as of late in the office. I actually bring in my favorite, I read sci-fi and fantasy novels. I actually made it a point to bring in my favorite book that's on my nightstand. Instead of having it there, I try to bring it into the office. And I have this stack of sci-fi and fantasy novels on my desk, blatantly out there. Multiple times throughout the day, I take a 10-15 minute break and actually read my favorite book. And it's super obvious. I'm doing it out in the open. Everyone can see me. They see that their boss is taking a break, so they ought to take a break too. And I remember saying to her, I am so proud of you. That is amazing. Fantastic job role modeling. It's nuanced point though, really quick, from a neuroscientist. Unfortunately, that's actually not taking a break because you're still processing information. You're reading. So my 3 rules for effective break taking: no reading, no writing, no arithmetic. The whole point is treat the brain like a muscle. Stop using it. You actually got to give the thing a little bit of a rest. So even if you might be, sending a text message to a loved one and you're like, this is good work-life balance, I'm actually taking a break. It is not a break. I'm still working from home, Sahar. I went outside and I laid down, in a patio chair outside and I read my favorite book. Not taking a break. Stop processing information. So again, treat the brain like a muscle and actually give that muscle a rest so that you can lift as heavy as a weight after that break as you did before. Because if you don't, we're not riding that wave and you're going to end up nosediving in energy by, 3, 4, 5 o'clock. You're just going to notice that your brain is not operating the same way. Okay. So let's go ahead and dive into, okay, so you're telling me I can't do all this stuff. What can I do? We can really, really quickly eat or hydrate. Briefly, 2012 study showed that just 2% levels of dehydration can cause up to a 20% decrease in cognitive performance. That is huge. We can measure a 20% decrease in our ability to process information and think critically and clearly just because we're 2% dehydrated. And just FYI, if you're thirsty, it's too late. 2% dehydration is not much. So get yourself a dedicated massive water bottle and just fill that thing up every single morning and just sip on it throughout the course of the day. Next one, really briefly, exposure to light. If you're feeling low energy, human beings are creatures of light. And if you cannot get outside to take a bit of a break, go ahead and invest in one of these. It's a sun lamp. I have one of these on my desk next to me all the time. So when I can't get outside and get real sunshine, or if it's a gray day, I turn on my little sun lamp. It's right here on my desk at all times. And it allows me to get exposure to really bright light. And these sun lamps are made in such a way so they convince your brain that it's about high noon. So it looks like bright blue light that you're getting from the sun. And if you do that, you can trick your brain into making a lot of those good hormones again. So you stay super alert and focused. All right. And on that note, join me in the breakout if you want to go over with me 5 more ways to optimize your breaks. I'm going to talk about caffeine and the science behind caffeine and how to optimize your caffeine and coffee and tea intake. And then we'll talk about some action planning. So what do you actually want to take away? Let's actually plan out at least a couple breaks for you all by the time we go, and some Q&A. And on that note, thanks everyone to Wild. I'm excited for our breakout. I'm excited for the entire session and preparing for ADC this year. So to come talk to me in the breakout if you want to start planning in advance for how to stay high energy throughout all of ADC. Let's just plan for it in advance. We can strategize together. And email me if you like this kind of research, or follow our lab on Instagram for more tips.
Thank you for joining us here at our fourth quarterly WILD event. We're still informing this nascent initiative, and I so appreciate all of your perspectives and thoughts, and most of all, your being with me here in community as we seek to learn together. So somebody who's been, somebody who's had diabetes almost 35 years, I know I'm often asked to give a patient perspective, and I know many of you and I have talked about this. While I can give thoughts about my own experience, of course, that's just one perspective. We have in common a diagnosis. Those of us with diabetes, there are cohorts, but we're still one person with one individual pathway. So thank you guys for understanding that, for making those pathways easier and better. Much like I think it is challenging to capture perspectives of such a broad continuum of patients, especially underrepresented populations in our patient community, which is so critical, we obviously can't know the experience of all women leaders in diabetes. And that's why I'm asking you to gather every quarter with us. We're lucky to learn from each other as female leaders and team members, and with our allies as we are sharing unique perspectives. We're learning from our speakers and also from each other. So we've designed WILD to strengthen skills for you, your teams, for connecting with experts. And today, having the chance to optimize our experience at ADA, this is going to be incredible as our field grows and as new ways to think about and see data emerge. We're going to get smarter in the next half hour, 40 minutes about that. If you feel that you are learning, please go to and spread the word about closeconcerns.com/wild, the recordings that are there. It has just been a dream hearing from, whether it's Insulet, Stacey Petrovic, or Jane Lai, Trang Lai, or J&J's, Jane Addams. We have had a lot of wonderful opportunities so far in and through the pandemic. And we certainly know that the pandemic is raging in many parts of our world. All of the things that all of you are doing in and around diabetes and making people with diabetes even healthier is just key to being able to change things on a population level, on a community level. Thank you to Abbott and to Insulet and to Novo Nordisk and to our manager of these WILD events, Karen Irwin. Your commitment, your execution has been incredibly welcome to us, to our whole Close Concerns team, and to Hope from DQ&A in making these events happen. And again, thank you to everyone who is here or who will be looking at the recording, seeing so many directors, VPs, women from C-suites, other senior execs who are making it possible is heartwarming to me. So what an all-star panel we have for you today. So Dr. Courtney Elias and Dr. Stacey Beck, you see on the big board, see those lights, Dr. Eden Miller, real-world evidence guru, Laura Brandner, and Dr. Bob Gabay. This panel is going to be moderated by Katie Spade, who many of you know. She's now head of global marketing at Abbott Diabetes Care, having been promoted from head of US commercial really recently for ADC, and she's very modest. So I wanted to say that, Katie. Thank you for your leadership of this. After the panel, everyone, you know there is going to be the opportunity to go to breakout rooms, to be in community with Sahar, with a new leader that we're meeting named Suba Berry, who's really helping us think more concretely and in much more advanced ways about DEI, and with Dr. Fran Kaufman, who has an amazing set of thoughts in and around parity in our field. And then our own Close Concerns team will be ready to give you advice about next week as well. So passing it off to you, Katie.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. I'm just so thrilled to be here and to be able to be part of this amazing panel. Real world evidence is everywhere and in every therapeutic area, and I just can't wait to dig in and hear what our speakers have to say. So thinking back to early 2020, as Kelly and our teams were putting together the WILD building blocks, we said we're all about advancing emerging and senior women leaders of color, women who have diabetes, and we want to learn together. We want to learn in community. So we made 5 phone calls, and here we are with 5 amazing top thinkers from our field discussing the topic of real world evidence. We're going to paste the bios in the chat and go through these very quickly. So first, let me introduce Laura Brandner, an engineer by training. She joins us as the Director of Real World Evidence Programs at Abbott. Her leadership has grown exponentially through her work over the last 15 years across digital platforms, software innovation, brand strategy, and R&D device development. Next, Dr. Robert Gabay. He joins us from the ADA, where we all know him not only as the ADA's top scientific and medical leader, but also as one of the world's foremost experts in the delivery of diabetes care through much of his work at Joslin. Dr. Courtney Elias is the acting head of gastrorenal, OBGYN, general hospital, and urology devices at the FDA as of January this year. This promotion follows her longstanding previous role as the director of the Division of Chemistry and Toxicology at CDRH. And Stacy Beck has been the VP of Clinical and Strategic Partnerships at Dexcom for several years. Previously, she was the Diabetes Diagnostics Devices Branch Chief at the FDA. She and Courtney are very well known for their dual expertise and partnership. It's amazing to see you both here on the same screen. Dr. Eden Miller is a respected family care doctor who practices in the Pacific Northwest. She founded Diabetes and Obesity Care in Bend, Oregon, as well as the nonprofit Diabetes Nation. She presents regularly on real-world evidence and the impact of optimal interventions for patients. We're so privileged to have all of these leaders here. A huge thank you during this extraordinarily busy time. And now we're going to have a few short presentations to give some background information on the top of real-world evidence. I know it may be new for many of you, and so what we wanted to do is just give you a little bit of an intro before we jump into the Q&A. So first, we're going to start with Laura. It's great to see you. Over the past few years, you've invested heavily in learning about real-world evidence in your role. And for our attendees that may be less familiar, it would be great for you to get us oriented with some of the basics that may include the how, why, what of real-world evidence. I know you prepared a few slides to get us kick-started on this topic, so let me hand it over to you.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks, everybody. I really just started working in this area a couple of years ago, so I wouldn't call myself a guru. I would still say that I'm a student of real-world evidence, learning something new every day. But very honored to participate in such a distinguished panel, and I appreciate all the different perspectives we have on this panel. I first got interested in real-world data and real-world evidence because it seemed like an interesting opportunity to make use of data in a different way and to try to solve a different problem. So it's been exciting to work in this growing space to figure out how to gather useful data in a real-world setting, analyze it in robust and meaningful ways, and discuss like the insights that can be generated from it. It always ends up fostering conversation and new ideas and additional research always. For the next few minutes, I'm kind of taking us back to when I was first learning about real-world evidence and all the questions I had about it at that time. What, how, and why, but also where, who, why now, and kind of what's next. So I wanted to first communicate that there's really a difference and a distinction between real-world data and real-world evidence. Data is what's collected, and then evidence comes about when that data is analyzed in studies, and that's where the insights come from. And then, of course, the data comes from multiple sources involved in the routine care and usual care in a clinical setting. These sources have different types of data, as you can see on the slide, and then some of these different data sources can be combined, others would have to be analyzed separately. There are a lot of options of different types of data that can be analyzed in a real-world setting. And just at the very bottom, I thought of some keywords and phrases to look for as you're prepping for ADA, maybe help you pick out posters that would be about real-world data and real-world evidence. So lots of retrospective studies, but also some prospective, word observational, cohort, routine care, database, pragmatic, those types of keywords might be useful as you get ready for ADA. But then who uses real-world evidence and for what purposes? So, I won't speak for FDA. I'll leave that to Dr. Elias to go into the regulatory agency perspective, but evidence can really be used by payers, by professionals, and of course by patients to help everybody inform the treatment and decision-making process around the best care for someone. That could be a decision on a treatment for a very specific individual, or it can be a decision as to who gets access to what type of therapy. So real world data plays into those decisions. Of course, we have to think about how does real world evidence fit in with more traditional randomized control trials. I don't think anybody in this group, anybody expects randomized control trials to ever go away. They do a good job balancing different sources of bias. They can, conclude causation of an intervention, but there are limitations that they might have very strict inclusion criteria, and the study setting might be really controlled and less realistic. Real world data is more observational, and therefore it has its own different sources of bias, but generally it has large populations, real life clinical settings, and usually includes a broader set of patients. So truly real world data and RCTs should be seen to complement each other. But then why would RWE be prolific now? So in my view, there's a lot of new data being generated between connected medical devices, mobile devices, different sources of this data. There was also recent legislations that was meant to support bringing new innovations to patients faster, more efficiently. That's the 21st Century Cures Act, which was now 5 years old, but still recent. And this helps change regulations and processes in the healthcare industry. And related to these two advances, there's all these different pieces coming together and many companies springing up that have access to data or certain analyses or integrate data that could support the research. So I really feel like RWE has taken off in the last few years, and I think most would agree. And I won't go into all these questions, but just to say there are a lot of things to think about for what's next in real world data and evidence, and the panel will hopefully get into some of these questions as well. So I know that was fast, but we have a lot to get through, and just want to say it's been exciting learning for me and my team, and I hope this was helpful to kickstart our conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura, for helping us understand the how, why, and what of real world evidence. So next, I'd like to pass it on to Dr. Lias. It's so great to have you here on the panel. And I know in your discussions with Kelly, you had offered to share your perspective on real world evidence and its value in comparison to or alongside randomized control data. So I will hand it off to you to speak next.
So you've just heard that real world data are data that we generate from a lot of different efforts. And I think what I want to emphasize today is that the use and the generation of real world data and real world evidence is a key priority at FDA. And I'm going to tell you why I think that's important as well. And this is a change from the past, in that in the past, I think in my experience, many entities, whether they be investigators, whether they be industry or inventors, they often hesitated to think that the FDA would consider anything other than a randomized controlled clinical trial to support evidence for anything. And so I think it's really important that FDA's emphasis on real world data collection and the use of real world evidence be seen as a signal to everyone. If you have data and it's relevant to the question you're asking, you should bring it to us. Another thing that I think is notable about FDA's emphasis on the generation of real world data and the use of real world evidence is the efforts for FDA to help these particular areas understand what type of infrastructure do we need to make these data sources usable. In some areas, like in one of the newer areas I'm working in, for example, in neurology, they have pretty good registries for some of the medical devices out there where, every device that goes into a patient is tracked, as well as outcomes from that. And those types of data that come out of that can be used, to support new indications. But in the area of diabetes, there are registries, but many of them are not set up to collect some of the types of outcome information that may be helpful to support new drugs or new devices. And so the infrastructure in place to get the data elements available in electronic health records, to understand what's put into medical billing records, will really help everybody be able to use real world data and real world evidence a little bit better. What else is notable about the use of real world data and real world evidence? I mean, you already heard the difference between the two, but I think one thing that's notable is that sort of the old concept of how data is generated is that a company does a controlled trial or an observational study related to the product. They throw it over the wall to FDA. We look at it. We say, no, we don't like that study. We throw it back and they have to redo it. That doesn't sound like it's in the interest of patients. And so the idea would be, that we can use this information for what it's suitable for and help accelerate the availability of new products to patients. So, real world data is data, and that's one of the take-home messages that I want people to take away from this. Just because something is quote unquote real world data doesn't mean that it's in any way different than other sources of data with respect to its value. What's the question you're asking, and how can that data be utilized? It can be utilized for generating hypotheses to figure out whether or not a new drug should move forward. It can be there to inform other clinical trials. It can be there, as was mentioned before, to make randomized trials smaller. Maybe you can use some real world data and supplement an existing smaller or shorter trial with that data to get a product to market faster. It can expand indications, which I think is a really exciting way that people would like to use registries. And, as mentioned before, I think can't underestimate just the value of providing information to clinicians and patients about the products that they're already using. Because the more information you have, the better way that you can determine which tool is good for you. So what I want to emphasize is that FDA is open to real world data and the use of real world evidence, no matter what you want to use it for. And that people should wrap their mind around the idea of if the data supports the question, it should be used. So please don't be afraid to bring it to us. And with that, I'm really excited to get into the discussion later. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Elias. That was really helpful. And I really loved the framework you used for the uses across the total product life cycle. It was great. So our last speaker before we jump into the panel, Dr. Gabbay, I know you must be extremely busy with the ADA Sci sessions coming up just a week from tomorrow. And there's going to be so many exciting findings and studies to be revealed. As we've discussed in preparation, there's an increasing body of real world evidence as well that's influencing clinical guidelines and practice that's all going to be starting to be revealed and has been revealed in these previous scientific sessions. So with that, I'd love to hand it over to you to share some of your perspectives, what we should be on the lookout for, and I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And it really is a pleasure to be here. And I have to tell you on behalf of the American Diabetes Association, we're very much aligned with the work that you all are doing in WILD. You may have seen we published in both Diabetes Care and Diabetes, a perspective about women in diabetes. And it speaks to why this is the work that we're all collectively doing is that much more important. And that was authored by our CEO, Tracy Brown, and our two presidents, Ruth Weinstock and Cynthia Munoz and myself. And so I encourage you to take a look. But let me get back to real world evidence. So you're right that there is a lot of information at the scientific sessions around that. I'm going to zoom out a moment and if one thinks about why do we need real world evidence, 6 different things come to mind, and there are probably lots more. And this sort of builds on the comments of both Laura and Courtney. So first, what real world evidence lets us do is understand context. So we're not going to repeat RCT in every different environment, in rural places, in urban places, in other countries. It's just not feasible. But real world data can tell you if there are differences, if those context differences make a difference. So that's one. The second is understanding adherence. So, in a typical randomized clinical trial, they're very structured and people tend to be a lot more adherent in those trials because there are study coordinators making sure it's not real life. And we know real life is more complicated. And so it allows you to be able to look at that piece if it's a therapy or intervention or a tool, whatever that might be. The third is that just by the nature of real world evidence, one can have a scale, you can look at hundreds of thousands, if not millions of individuals. And if you think about the data that came out that really helped to drive policy around COVID and diabetes, it was real world evidence that told us early on that diabetes was a significantly higher risk, that corrected the notion that type 1 diabetes was not as high a risk and therefore should be deprioritized for vaccination, something we fought vehemently, I guess. So it gives you that scale. The fourth is that there's sort of like certain questions you just can't answer, like in an RCT, because you couldn't do an RCT. Is it important to treat hypoglycemia? Well, of course, you're not going to have one arm where you don't treat hypoglycemia and see what happens. You can't do that study, right? But you can look at the impact of hypoglycemia on many other outcomes from real world evidence. So again, certain things can't be answered and therefore can only be answered through real world evidence. And then the fifth area is, it's often challenging to do studies in certain populations. Some of that is risks, some of that, and two areas that come to mind is around pediatrics. We don't see a lot of things tested in pediatrics as much as we would like, but real world evidence can allow us to look at that. Pregnancy is another area where real world evidence can give the data that you probably typically exclude pregnant women from a variety of trials. And the last of the six is around quality improvement. So in doing quality improvement work, you really want to see trends. You're not going to randomize a whole population to this QI effort and that QI effort. That's just not the way. It's an iterative change, and you need real world evidence to tell you, yep, this is starting to work or this isn't. So, at scientific sessions, if you just look at real world evidence presentations, there are 46 of them, and we heard from Laura a bunch of other search terms. You will see a lot, and I'm glad during the question and answer to sort of highlight a few of those things, but the number of presentations around real world evidence is really blossoming, and you'll see that next week in our scientific sessions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dr. Gabbay. That was really helpful. I loved hearing all about the 6 different ways that real world evidence is impacting. So before we, and Dr. Lias and Laura, also thank you for helping us get started. So valuable to hear from all our panelists already. I just wanted to toss it over to Dr. Miller and Dr. Beck to see if you have any other thoughts before we jump in, or anything you'd like to add as well based on our first few presentations.
I love how this is our platform to discuss, really kind of the first of its kind, looking at real world evidence. I often think of it as where science meets a clinical practice, and it's like I can be scientifically minded, but I want to be clinically meaningful. And I love how we're exploring it because it's really science put into that practice. And so thanks for convening this so we can kind of piece it apart a bit.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Katie and everyone. I think the presentations were very helpful for setting the stage, and I think particularly Laura discussing really the marriage of both needing randomized studies as well as real world evidence is an incredibly important point.
Awesome. So as we get started, I'd like to start with the clinician's perspective. So Dr. Miller, let's jump in with you. Tell us how real world evidence, and you alluded to this already, has emerged in your clinical work and what it means to you. So why don't we get started there, and I'll ask Dr. Gabbay to follow up as well from his practice too.
Yeah, I have to be bilingual. I have to speak science and I have to speak patient. And I enjoy, I think, more particularly doing that because I have to take that translated science and put it into meaningful representation. So for me, I think I get most excited about real world data because it's my dialect, right? I have that science piece of me, but I also have that real world because I am a real world clinician, right? And so I really particularly enjoyed real world data because it does a lot of things. First of all, it kind of verifies what I do in my practice. It's like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Number two, it's encouraging and it's directional. It's also really shows how it plays out in the world because like you guys talked about, you really did such a nice job of going through it. But there is a meaning for the provider because you don't want to just read something, you want to see it play out. And you want to see those faces and those people behind who are going to benefit, and it's going to help direct you. And that's why it's so meaningful to me.
Excellent. Always patient-centric, patient first. So that's great. And Dr. Gabbay, how about yourself?
Yeah, I agree. It's, you know, if one thinks about it, this is how clinicians really have always done things. So, you know, they read a study, but they say, well, in my clinical experience, right? And that is real world evidence from that provider. Now that can be very biased, and that's not necessarily the best way to do things. But then you take that the next step, and I'm reminded of you mentioned that I used to be at the Joslin Diabetes Center. I still see patients there. Elliot Joslin used, in essence, real world evidence. So he cataloged all the patients that he saw. And decades before the DCCT, he said better glucose control can prevent complications. And it was probably 30 to 40 years later that the DCCT was done. But it was that real world evidence that drove the way care was delivered for many, many people for many, many years. So real world evidence has been around for a long time. It's sort of what we do as clinicians.
Excellent. I love that story. That's great from the Joslin Center. Dr. Beck, I'd love to get your perspective as well from the clinical research side. Could you share any thoughts on the evolving approaches and benefits of real world evidence alongside randomized control trials as well, because we talked about both already?
Sure. I really think both are really necessary to fully understand the benefits and risks of a product, whether that be a drug or a device. Clinical studies, as we've kind of discussed, can be incredibly prescriptive and not really reflective of how the device will actually be used. So while they're important for gathering certain types of information, most of my experience is around continuous glucose monitors or CGMs. And, you really do need to understand exactly how accurate that is. You do have to do that, you have to bring people into a clinic setting and draw blood every couple of minutes to measure that on a truth or a comparator analyzer. While that's important because you want to understand how accurate it is, you can only enroll certain people. You have to have very clear and careful inclusion-exclusion criteria. It's not really safe to do that in children regularly, pregnant women, people who've given blood or have had cardiac problems. So while it's important to get that information, you don't really get the full picture there of how a device or even a drug really works in a particular population. So that's where, a real world evidence or even studies that are a little more real world like can be very beneficial. This can really allow you to understand, who will benefit from that data. It also helps you to look at a much larger number of people, right? Those studies are difficult and time consuming. And so really getting to see, not just a couple hundred people, but 1,000 people or 10,000 people or and seeing those benefits and actually also seeing some of the risks that can come about that might not become apparent when you're doing such a controlled study, I think is very important. And it really lets you be able to see that for the different populations when that device or a drug for that matter is used in that manner. So.
Great. And Laura, anything else to add as well from a clinical research side as well?
Yeah, something I've learned over the last couple of years. If you're deciding on which type of study to do or thinking about which one is going to answer the question that you have, you're taking into account resources and time and all of those things too. So while a single real world evidence study might save you time and money versus a single RCT, what I've learned is you need more real world evidence. So you might have to do multiple of them, and you have to think about the quality and the quantity of the real world analysis that might be needed to tell a similar story as one RCT would do. So you have to just take those perspectives and think about how much information you really need.
Excellent. So we've gotten clinician, we've gotten clinical research side, and Dr. Elias, I wanted to jump in and bring you in on another question and get your perspective on this. So Dr. Janet Woodcock, the acting commissioner of the FDA, had recently commented on real world evidence, saying that the use of real world evidence in product reviews will be slower than many of its supporters are hoping, because there are a number of problems that still need to be addressed. And she indicated this would be an evolution rather than a revolution. Perhaps you could share some of your perspective on what the gaps may be and where you see the greatest value. I know you already highlighted some of this already around the total product life cycle, but maybe, focusing on the gaps and the opportunities would be great.
Right, and I want to emphasize that an important first step, is, for example, Janet's emphasis on how important real world evidence is. I think we can't overlook that FDA is emphasizing that real world data should be used. So while she's talking about gaps, I don't want it to be lost that FDA is pro real world data, pro real world evidence. However, she is correct that the infrastructure is not always there to run the ideal real world data trial or to collect the useful, it doesn't have to be ideal necessarily, but to collect useful real world data that we would like to collect. And although I don't want to speak for her, I believe that's where one of the biggest gaps exists, the ability to collect the information that we know is out there on these use cases. And so certain areas have that infrastructure better than others. I think that's why she's calling this an evolution. We can use it here. Soon we will be able to use it there.
That's super helpful. And just to follow up to Dr. Beck as well, is you've had unique experience both on the government side as well as the manufacturer side. How has your regulatory experience informed your experience now in industry as well on similar questions?
Yeah, of course, it's always easy from the regulatory side to just tell someone, no, you need to go do a study. It can be a little harder, as I've been learning to actually do that study. And I actually think that might even be a little more true when you're talking about more real world studies and collecting real world data. I think there's kind of a misconception sometimes that collecting real world data is always quick, it's easy and less complicated. There are instances where that can be true, but like Dr. Elias was saying, it really depends on the question being asked, what information exists, and if there is already an established pipeline for collecting the data, as well as the validity of that data. A good example is actually the T1D exchange, and that's an established registry that collects data from thousands of people with type 1 diabetes. If the question being asked is one that could be easily answered using that exchange, it might be relatively quick. That's great. But there is limited information there, and it's not always super complete. This can be hard for registries and even when you use electronic health records. So if you have to set up a completely new registry or a way to collect the data, it can actually be incredibly time consuming, and you need to really validate every step of that process, as well as make sure that what you're trying to get can be taken from your sources of data. So, I do think that it's easier when you kind of think, oh, great, we'll do a big real world evidence type collection of data, and that's great. And then, a year, 2 years later, you're like, why hasn't that gotten further along than I thought it would be? So.
That makes sense. We talked a little bit, you mentioned, Dr. Beck, the patient registries. I wanted to bring in Dr. Miller on this, on that topic. So, as you're thinking, what is the continuum of how comfortable or uncomfortable patients tend to be on their, regarding the use of their real world data or their health data? I'd love to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, I think we get a lot of that initial question because it's so important to be, have privacy and sacredness in people's healthcare. And so I always think that we should keep that mindfulness. What I like to explain, even as I've done research or explaining real world data to my colleagues, a lot of this is the herd. It's not necessarily an individual. It's like the collective people. And we're not pulling out just individual type things. We're really saying how many people visited a particular area, not who did it or that kind of thing. And we're creating generalized data based on populations and larger criteria. So I think it gives us unique perspectives, but it also retains that applicability to the person, right? And so it's kind of the best of both worlds. Of course, we would never want any of that to feel that patients, that their health information is jeopardized, but the way it's constructed, it really does more highlight the group rather than the individual. And so often doesn't have as much risk or consenting that's required in that arena.
That's really helpful. Anyone else, any other comments on that one as well? No.
Just from the researching side, yeah, principles for handling patient data are the same as any other scenario. It's sensitive data and patient privacy is paramount. So there's regulations and rules to anonymize and pseudonymized data. In different countries it's different, so that can be a challenge that you have to think about, but this is the first question we get to when we think about a new project.
Excellent, thanks, Laura. So Dr. Gabay, we're getting close to the ADA. You mentioned that you were going to share some of the things that you're looking forward to seeing and what you're excited about for the meeting. Would love to, love for you to share, some of your thoughts on that. I know in our discussion we also talked about precision medicine and real world evidence. So maybe just any exciting thoughts or things we should be looking for as we get up to the ADA coming up soon.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, 1,100 presentations. So there is something literally for everybody. There's a whole bunch of stuff about real world evidence, and I'll mention a few highlights there. I'll also, for those of you, many of you are involved, but there is a WIN-ADA, which is a women's organization within ADA that is really fostering interprofessional networking and is having a number of events. So I encourage you to sort of have an opportunity to join that. So let me throw a few of the real world evidence examples, and you can see why these studies probably couldn't have been done any other way. So automated insulin delivery in older adults. Probably not something that anyone's going to do an RCT on, but it's something we need to know. Does it work? How effective is it? What are the pitfalls? You mentioned T1D exchange. They have a study looking at predictors of people that did well and got to an A1C less than 7 in their quality improvement initiative. And again, it gets that understanding of quality. A lot of presentations about trends of adoptions of therapy, which I think help us from a public health point of view, and those of us looking to educate providers. Where do we really need to do our work? You'll see a lot of stuff about continuous glucose monitors in the hospital, and that is a new world that really, is maybe a little bit of a silver lining to the pandemic. Lots of stuff about management of diabetes and COVID, the DARE trial that looks at SGLT2 drugs for individuals with diabetes and COVID. Landmark trials, the GRADE trial, big comparative effectiveness study funded by NIDDK, will literally be releasing its results. And for those of you that have been to these kind of meetings in the past, you're in the audience, you're waiting to hear they set it all up. The minute it sort of gets announced, everyone's checking their phone, texting, looking for the article in New England Journal or wherever. So there'll be all that. It's going to be a big focus on health disparities and approaches to reduce that. That's another thing that I think COVID has been a magnifier for. just a wealth of really exciting work that people will be sharing. And we've made the experience more interactive and more engaging. And I think people will enjoy that. We've also completely revamped our exhibit hall. It is now a virtual exhibit hall, and you can get the latest in various products that I think people will find very helpful. So a lot of exciting stuff. And then, of course, our award winners and our presidential lectures will be outstanding. I had the opportunity to, since they're all taped, we actually have taped. There are only 4 out of 1,100 people that have not taped their thing, so that's pretty good. So thank you all for having done that, and look forward to seeing you all at the scientific sessions starting next Friday.
Oh, that's going to be great. I know we all miss being together in person, but you guys have done a tremendous job. The ADA has done a tremendous job in really making that virtual community come together. So really excited. I know we're all looking forward to it. So, you know, as we get closer towards the end, I just have a few more questions to go through that I'd love to get some feedback on. You know, Dr. Elias, you talked a little bit about, we talked about some of the challenges, but, you know, I'd love to, as we just talked about the ADA, all of the exciting studies that are coming out, would love to, you know, ask you about the future trajectory of real world evidence on the regulatory front. You know, is there a possibility that we could see real world evidence reduce some of the burdens on pre-market potentially, or, you know, as an example, or things like that? So I'd love to get your feedback on.
Absolutely. And actually, there have been cases where it's already reduced the burden on pre-market, including some CGM approvals in the past, where extensive experience with the device weighed heavily in some of the decisions that were made from a regulatory perspective. We've also used various forms of evidence that weren't, formal types of trials to deal with edge cases, as Dr. Gabbay kind of intimated. Like, sometimes it's very hard to study in certain populations or in certain situations that may come up or may arise rarely. Different types of data sources, real world evidence being one of them. Also modeling, or sort of, looking at different ways of modeling the information that may come forward is another way of sort of trying to shrink the trial, trying to show that, we have a little bit of data that we've collected in a more formal way to get some understanding of device performance. And here's this additional information from a clinical perspective, like we also heard from Dr. Miller, what's really happening out there with these products that really just puts it over the edge. So you're already seeing real world data in some ways, in some pre-market decision making. Real world data enters in a lot in the post-market as well. But like Janet Woodcock said, it's an evolution, so we hope to see a lot more in the future.
That's great. Thank you so much. So, health equity has become a really big topic, specifically around, healthcare, and, would love to open this up to everyone, especially Dr. Gabbay. I know it's a big focus of the ADA. How has real world evidence been a driver towards greater health equity, and could it even be a bigger driver as we think going forward?
Yeah, I'm glad to start because it really, it's one of the, in many ways, when we look back at the pandemic, it's done a lot of different things, beyond all the tragedy associated with it. But it has been a magnifier of some chronic issues that we've had in this country. And one of them is health equity. And health equity in diabetes is, horrible. If you're a Black American, you're twice as likely to have an amputation. I mean, that, yeah, and you go through all of the different ways. So I think real world evidence, one, helps to place a spotlight on this issue in a bigger way. On the other hand, I think we want more than that, right? Like we know it exists, and so we're in the process at ADA of funding a number of research grants around health disparities, and one of the ways, one of the criteria is you can't just document that there's a big inequity in care. We know that. You got to do something about it. The other way we've been addressing this is partnering with large organizations, Walmart, Abbott, and pooling our resources to do things that will really move the needle, where 1 and 1 is 5, like really making a difference and getting at some of the systemic reasons why there are these health inequities. And so, yeah, it's really important.
Excellent. And any others? Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
You know, for me, real world data is revealing those health inequities we may not have otherwise seen. And so I think it is an opportunity because in the title, Real World, which we're all in this world together, and it is very real. And so how do we pull that out and how can we identify it where a certain RTC may have totally missed that opportunity? So even though sometimes it's revealing the pain, it's also for an opportunity. And I mean, I liken all of this to be a complete circle of science, because science is of no benefit unless we can clinically apply it. And so it's that full circle. They each have their benefits. It's, you know, just like, you know, CGM, it's the real-time glucose, and real world data has that feel of we're out there and practicing. It's science in play. And you don't lean on one or the other, you lean on many of them and you learn from them and you get encouraged by it. And it's this ongoing chapters that we're not static, because information empowers us, and how we deal with that information, how we reconcile it, how we ask the questions, because we're scientists and we care for people, and how we merge all that together.
Can I'll just throw out one other idea that many, you know, where I think we're on the cusp of this. You know, so much of diabetes care is around being able to influence behavior. And we're not very good at that, you know, bottom line. You know, we're learning. You know, what real world evidence can do as we have wearable devices coupled with behaviors that individuals are undertaking, we can behaviorally phenotype people and figure out what kinds of prompts, what kinds of engagements are going to work best for which people. And that in essence is the promise of precision medicine, to know for you as an individual, here's the best way to nudge you in the right way at the right time. And that can only happen in real world evidence.
Absolutely. That's great. I know we are all different in how we respond and what we need at different moments. None of us are exactly the same, and we all go through different journeys. So I fully appreciate that. And thanks Dr. Bay. Thanks Dr. Miller for that feedback. So I'd like to just close with one last thing you'd like to leave the panel with. Maybe we'll go around. I'll start with Laura and go through and just share one last thing you'd love to leave the panel with before we close.
Sure. Yeah, this has been a great discussion. So thanks everybody for your perspectives. One thing I just wanted to add a little bit is I feel like there's still this element of education with payers, with regulators, with professionals about real world data. It's still somewhat new, even though it's not brand new. So not everybody has been exposed to it, and there sometimes needs to be more explanation up front about the data set or the analysis or the process used to collect the data when presenting the evidence, but I think it's worth it. So don't let that hold you back.
Great. Dr. Beck, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think we touched on how important real world evidence can be, and I did kind of mention I think it would be great if we could have more registries already built, ways to have that pipeline there. So, you know, if folks are interested in building that, I think it would be really awesome, because that would really help to be able to quickly and you know, do a better job of really being able to get information as long as you know, it's already been validated and kind of set up. I think that could really increase the power of that data.
Excellent. I love that. That's great. Great call to action. Dr. Miller, how about yourself?
Well, for me, the more real world data helps me keep this disease more real to patients, because what I try to do is have them live the sweetest life, but take diabetes along for the ride. And it is a marathon. It's hard. It's hard to live with a chronic disease. And anything that I can take from the science and make it real for them, and meet them at where they're at and be inspiring. So much of this seems so hard and so challenging, often the burden, but I believe real world gives us more insight as a population, as a disease state in play that will benefit from it. So I'm glad we are talking about it. And to Dr. Gabay's point, as scientists, as clinicians, we're all real worlding all the time. We're looking at it. And so can we, instead of in our brains, can we put this, can we benefit for all our real world experiences and share them collectively?
Excellent. Dr. Elias, how about yourself?
I think from my perspective, communicate, with the regulators, payers too, if you can. They're sometimes harder to find. But, we're people behind those things. And, the people who are going to build Stacey's registries, talk with us about it. What kind of data elements will make it useful to push products forward? What kind of data elements will help the payers get the information they need to cover the products that patients need? So communication is key across all stakeholders.
Excellent. Love that. Communication for sure key, as always, in all relationships. Dr. Gabay, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, real world evidence has always been here. It will be here even more so in the future. And that's because of, again, I guess those 6 things, context, you can't do it any other way. Adherence, nothing's going to have the scale of real world evidence. There are unanswerable questions that you just can't do any other way. There are going to be special populations that we won't be able to study unless we use real world evidence. And for quality improvement, it's essential. And I guess what I heard here today, which I think this has been a great discussion, I might add a 7th, and that is to understand safety. Yeah, that's going to have to come from real world evidence. That's where the signals come from, and so that's yet another reason. So if that isn't enough, I don't know what would be. And look forward to seeing you all at the scientific sessions. Register if you haven't, and you'll hear a lot of more discussion on this subject.
Excellent. Well, first and foremost, I wanted to thank all of our panelists for taking the time to be a part of the panel and for sharing their insights. I learned a lot, and this panel really exemplifies the unique learning opportunity that WILD offers. It's just been an honor to be with each and every one of you. I feel, you are such distinguished, amazing leaders in the field of diabetes, and a huge thank you. And it's been wonderful to be able to spotlight each one of you. So WILD is open to senior and emerging women leaders who want to build their skills, increase their leadership potential, find peer support, and connect in community with each other. If you really enjoyed this type of content and the ones before, please keep attending and help us to continue to build this community. Events take place on a quarterly basis, so spread your word to all your colleagues and friends, and be a part of learning and hearing these amazing speakers. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Kelly. Thank you so much.
Wow, what a cool discussion, everyone. Thank you very, very much as well. I just echo Katie's thanks. Hearing so hard to start us off today, and then Courtney and Stacey, Laura, Dr. Eden, Bob. Terrific to hear your perspectives. I realized when I started also going through some of the material that we sent out just this morning as follow-up, if people want to learn even more of course, there was much more there that I didn't even understand and didn't even know that I didn't know. So that was really, really cool to see. We'll be sending that out again. We also will be sending out just a synthesis of the lessons that we learned today and all of this valuable background that we got as we march toward ADA Sci Sessions number 81. And, you know, again, with you, Katie, I'm just, WILD is a powerful community because it provides us these perspectives on leadership so that we can, you know, help ourselves become the best version of ourselves that we can be. So we're grateful for everybody who came on today on behalf of myself and the WILD team. Thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your schedules and for sharing these unique leadership perspectives with each other that you'll have the chance to do in the breakouts. You know, get in touch with us, wild@closeconcerns.com, if you'd like to get your organizations involved. And now I'm going to turn it over to Closed Concerns Associate Lucy Fu. She's been in from Dartmouth for the last 10 weeks. She's going to lead us into our breakout sessions for those of you who can stay. Appreciation all around and cheers.
Thank you, Kelly, and hello, everyone. Such a large part of WILD is developing greater community and connections. And that's exactly what we hope to offer you now in our skill building and networking breakout rooms. In a few minutes, you'll be able to choose one of our 4 breakouts, depending on what interests you most. There's not a more important or all-encompassing gathering all year in diabetes for this many people, and we know this learning will serve everyone here particularly well. Join Dr. Youssef's skill building session if you're interested in diving more deeply into the ways we can take effective breaks, especially for many emerging and senior women leaders going into the ADA scientific sessions. Saramount CEO Ms. Suba Berry will be hosting in WILD's second breakout what we're sure will be a compelling informational discussion centered around the recent Saramount Workplace Report on racial equity and inclusion across corporate America. Saramount is a strategic professional services firm with over 4 decades of experience in advancing DEI in the workplace. In this report, Ms. Berry's team surveyed over 2,400 professionals in partnership with Goldman Sachs, Abbott, and other industry leaders, revealing changes in employee perceptions and company actions. Research guru and CGM, time and range, and closed loop expert Dr. Francine Kaufman will be hosting our 3rd breakout, a networking session, with a focus on academic achievement and the salary parity among men and women in endocrinology. As a bit of background, Dr. Kaufman has been a longtime mentor to Kelly. They actually met in the late 1990s, and we're so grateful to her for being with us today. She's the 2nd woman president of the ADA, has 40+ years of experience in academic medicine, industry, and research, and is currently the Chief Medical Officer of Senseonics. The 4th and final breakout will be a session led by Kelly Close and several Close Concerns associates. This session will highlight the team's keen interest in the upcoming scientific sessions, as well as give a download on ATTD. They'll have a hot off the press link for you in their chat room with a newly updated preview. Now for the instructions on how you may select the breakout that interests you most. If you click the breakouts button on the Zoom bar at the bottom of your screen, a window will launch showing you all the WILD breakout rooms. If you take your cursor to the right of the room name you want to join, you'll see the join button. Don't click join yet, but in a few moments when we're finished here, you'll be able to click join to move yourself into your room. If your tech isn't working, you should stay in this main room and our team will manually move you to the breakout of your choice if you share a message in chat requesting help. Let us know which room you most want to join by typing the name or a couple of keywords of the topic in the Zoom chat window. Make sure you're sending that chat to everyone so anyone on our team can see and help you move quickly. For those wanting to maintain privacy, just send your top option to me. Finally, this main meeting room will remain open until the event concludes, so we can answer any questions or provide help you might need. Let us know how we can help. And that's all. Now click the breakout button and select the session you wish to attend and enjoy this gathering. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to go ahead just because I know we're not super behind, but I do want to make sure that we have enough time to go over everything that we did want to go over. So if you all don't mind, and by the way, feel free to chime in, unmute yourselves. This is an intimate enough. That's why I wanted to have everyone pause and kind of exchange some names and everything so that it's a conversation. There's just a handful of us, so we can just chat about this. But as a quick review, the topic of conversation really here is ultradian rhythms. It's the science, I should say, behind the conversation. The conversation is how to take effective breaks and why they're so important. But it is really based on the science behind ultradian rhythms and how it's really hormonal processes really take place in the body. And the fact of the matter that when we make these things that we utilize to be focused and alert and high energy and motivated. And then once we have used them, we've kind of used them up, and we need an opportunity to make more of the good stuff so that we can actually maintain our energy and performance throughout the course of the day. So I already mentioned too, during our wake up segment, eating and rehydrating. Taking an opportunity, and many of you have heard me talk about, effective nutrition, which is nothing new for folks in the diabetes community, but high protein and healthy fat snacks always. I have a general, according to a great deal of research done, some by actually my lab in collaboration with the Department of Defense, but we have something in DoD research that we call high performance nutrition, as opposed to calendar-based nutrition. These are the two worlds. Every Navy SEAL in the country will learn the same kind of thing. High performance nutrition has the following principles to keep in mind. Only feed yourself for the upcoming 2 to 3 hours. So large meals are already out the window. You're feeding yourself in small increments. And this is, by the way, not to optimize anything. It's not for longevity. It's not for anything other than we're optimizing for cognitive performance. So if you care about your mental energy levels, we're all knowledge workers here. Many are researchers who are dialing in. Many are leaders. We all have jobs where we're using our heads. So if you want to optimize for that, you want to make sure you're only really feeding yourself for the upcoming 2 to 3 hours, which means that you want to have meals no more than approximately 300 calories. And that 300 calorie small mini meal or snack should be optimized to have a bit of protein and a bit of healthy fats in it, if at all possible. And of course, staying hydrated. I mentioned the 2% dehydration already leads to massive decreases in cognitive performance. So even, for example, I'll just give some things that I do on the days when I'm optimizing for cognitive performance. Listen, because at the end of the day, it's, we're all trying to live our lives, and I will have my cake when I want to. That all of that happens. Real life happens as well. But if I'm optimizing for my cognitive performance, if I've got a long day coming up, even a piece of fruit like an entire apple or a banana is actually a big commitment when it comes to blood glucose. That can spike my blood glucose. And the principle there is what goes up must come down like gravity. So I tried to pair that with a little bit of peanut butter or almond butter or just a handful of cashews, something like that. So you want to inject some sort of fat to really fat and protein to slow down the release of that glucose. So those are just some quick tips in terms of what to eat. Exposure to light, I already mentioned. Huge fan of my little sun lamp. I'll bring it back into view again. But if you can't, it's not really about the sun lamp. It's more about getting outside and exposing yourself to bright light so that your brain is getting the signal that it's daytime and it shouldn't get lazy and keep making those good hormones to keep you highly energized throughout the course of the day. The next one I want to go over, movement, exercise. Humans are evolutionarily programmed to move. Historically speaking, looking at human evolution, the majority of our existence on this planet, we were made to walk about 10 to 12 miles a day. It's not a lot of this. What now, by the way, modern humans, what do we all do? We're stationary for most of the day. And then we say, oh, no, but we're healthy. So we want to exercise. So we jump on the Peloton bike. We do a CrossFit workout. We do Orange Theory, Soul Cycle. We do intensive exercise for about an hour. And the rest of the day, we're relatively stationary. Unfortunately, research in the past 15 years has been able to show us that it's not ideal. What's actually better is if you just actually get up every hour or so. We need to be sending signals to our bodies that we're not made to be sedentary and stationary. This is one of the main contributing factors to fatigue. So if you think of, again, human evolution, when you're sitting down at your computer, and yes, you might be using your mind, but if your body is really not moving for hours at a time, you're sending the signal to your body that perhaps it's the end of the day and it's time to wind down. Evidently, we're relaxing our body, which means that your body in kind will probably not make as much of those good hormones that we've been mentioning before. So you want to send the signal to your body every hour. And you can use a Fitbit for this or an Apple Watch to send you like a reminder to just say, get up. And I'm not saying get up and exercise. I mean, just get up and walk around the room, go to the restroom and back, keep filling up that water bottle, take a little bit of a snack break, just go outside, just take a loop around, move your body even in your video calls if you need to, but you have to shift your body a little bit to send the signal that we're not made to sit. And unfortunately, that 1 hour Peloton class at the end of the day actually doesn't undo the damage that we see from chronic sitting. Next, exposure to some sort of nature or green. Really interesting set of studies, but I wanted to go over this particular one from 2015 from the University of Melbourne, glancing at greenery for 40 seconds. 40 seconds, that is such a small period of time. Not only enhanced focus, but also lowered cortisol levels. So depending on what type of break you want to be taking, right? I kind of think of my breaks in 2 buckets. It's either I'm stressed out, I'm overwhelmed, and I need to decrease cortisol. So I have what I call a down regulatory break. I'm down regulating my energy and I'm down regulating my stress. Or I have an up regulatory break, meaning I'm starting to peter out in energy. I'm a little fatigued and I need to pump it up. I need to pump it up and keep my motivation high, keep my energy high. Depending on where I'm at right before I take even a couple minutes of a break, that will help me decide what kind of activities I want to do. Exposing yourself to nature decreases cortisol. So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed and you need a bit more of a mental reset, then I would suggest that you take a micro break. Again, less than a minute, 40 seconds, 40 seconds. Folks made fewer errors in the study and demonstrated superior concentration on subsequent tasks versus same 40-second break. It's not about the time. Not all breaks are made the same. That's really the point here. Is I know I said, listen, stop processing information. Yeah, you could stare at a wall, but you get more bang for your buck if you can stare at something green. Now, here's a really fun factoid. The findings in the study extended to fake plants. I know the human brain is amazingly complex. Listen, as a neuroscientist, I like to say, that I study something like one of the most complicated systems in the known universe, the human brain. Oh my gosh, yes, so it's also really stupid in so many ways. The human brain can't really tell the difference between a fake plant versus a real one. So if you're like me and you potentially struggle to keep plants alive, get a cactus, invest in a succulent, and if you kill it anyway, just throw it out and buy another one. It's not a big deal. Get a fake plant from Target and put it on your desk and stare at that. I actually have 2 fake plants in my bathroom. That I say, because otherwise I'm not going to remember to water them, to be honest. But you can also just look at images of green landscapes. All of these things have been shown to help decrease cortisol in a moment by moment basis. If you do like plants and you can keep them alive and you're wondering, okay, fine, I'll go to Lowe's this weekend or I'll pick up a plant. What plant should I buy? A spider plant is, I would consider, it's the most high performing plant for humans. Meaning it's easy to find, it's not expensive, it's easy to keep alive, but it also absorbs more CO2 and gives out more oxygen per square inch compared to any other plant. So it's just, if you're looking for a really hardworking plant to keep your home really fresh and clean, then a spider plant would be the one. A fun little factoid there. All right, so let's go ahead and go into the next piece of advice here, and that is to close your eyes. Now I know there's a silly little cartoon on this slide, but I want to impart you all with another analogy. So far, if you're keeping track of Sahara's funny analogies for the day, I've said that the brain is like a muscle and we actually need to rest it. That was one analogy, really thinking of the brain as a muscle. The next is really thinking of the brain as a boat as well. And it's a boat with a bunch of holes in it. It's a very old, crappy boat, okay? We all have old, crappy boats and they have holes. The biggest drainer, the biggest hole that exists inside of the brain, the area of the brain that takes up the most blood glucose, most blood oxygen, it's the area of the brain that takes up the most just overall energy, physiological and neurological energy, is the occipital cortex in the very back of the head. It's the area of the brain that's responsible for visual processing. If you're looking for the most bang for your buck, I've got 2 minutes in between my back-to-back meetings. What can I do to manage my energy? Close your eyes. You close your eyes just for a minimum of 10 seconds. We see a massive spike in alpha waves in the brain. Alpha waves are a marker of restfulness, okay? As opposed to beta waves, for example, which we see a lot of on video calls. Weird, another fun little factoid. Video calls are exceptionally draining. One of the main reasons why they're so draining is because you can see yourself during the video call, and that's super biologically unnatural. Area of the brain called the fusiform face area, or the FFA for short, has one job and one job only, and that is to process human faces, especially your own image. So do yourself a favor. I'm not sure which platform ADA is going to be using soon for the conference, but when you're in a video call, try to hide self view. If it's Zoom, the way that you do this is you hover over your own picture. You hit the ellipses, that button with the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner. You hit that and you hide self view. And when you do that, everyone else can see you. Your image is still going through to everyone else in the call, but you don't have to see yourself. And I want everyone to take a deep breath and not worry about what their hair looks like or how they're showing up on the call, because it's not going to matter when we're all in person, and it shouldn't matter now. Okay. So getting ourselves reused, if you're still working 100% from home, but you're anticipating you're going to be going back into the office, just get used to it now. Hide the self view. There's no reason for you to be seeing yourself and processing that unnecessarily. Again, the analogy that I want to impart here is, think of your brain as a boat, and you're trying to get the boat from one side of the lake to the next without drowning the boat. There are leaks in the system. Okay, there are leaks in the system. That's just a fact of how the human brain works. The biggest leak, occipital cortex. So close your eyes when you can. Tiny little 10-second pockets of time make a big difference. Every single time you go take a bathroom break, close your eyes for 10 seconds. When you're washing your hands, it's an opportunity to take a 10-second break. You're having a cup of coffee, close your eyes. If you're taking a walk around the block, take a few 10-second pauses to just keep your eyes closed in between meetings. And we're going to slowly dive into really the takeaways here. And I want to turn it to you all, because I want every single person in this breakout to walk away with a plan when you want to take your breaks and what that looks like. I want us to experiment and plan in advance for it and share with each other. But I will share with you all something that it's been a COVID lifesaver for me. When I'm in back-to-back meetings, which is often, I have a 10-second routine that I do when I close out of one video call and I'm about to open the next one up. 10 seconds, this is what I do. I take my glasses off of my face, I throw them on the table. I take, and I'm doing all of this with my eyes closed, by the way. I take my thumbs and I press it first into my jaws, the sides of my jaw here, because we have a tendency to hold so much tension in our jaw. So yeah, feel free to do this with me if you want to break as well now. So I do that first, and I kind of press into my jaw and I kind of roll it around a little bit. I then take my thumbs and I kind of press it into my forehead, my eye sockets a little bit, my eyebrow bone, my temples. I just give myself a little bit of a facial massage. And I do this thing. It's not super attractive, but no one can see you and it does not matter. Let's be honest. I lean forward a little bit so that I'm allowing gravity to pull a little bit on my facial muscles. When we're on video calls all day, and if you're still making the mistake of having your own self view on, this is why Botox sales have gone through the roof since COVID. We're all staring at ourselves and micromanaging every single facial muscle and trying to look alert and very, engaged the entire time. And it's all happening implicitly. I promised it's not vanity. It is not, you haven't lost yourself to vain social media culture of this generation. It's not about that. It's again, that FFA area of the human brain. Nobody can, it's even babies, if you put a mirror in front of them past a developmental age, they become enamored with their own image and they're fascinated by the fact that they move and then the image is moving. We never really grow out of this. But what I do is I kind of hover, I allow those facial muscles, at least for the duration, those 10-second period of time, to just relax, and gravity helps me do that. So I kind of, I allow my eyebrows to kind of just rest and relax a little bit. And then I allow gravity to do a lot of the work for me. And then I really let gravity do the work for me. I plunge my head down, chin towards my chest. I give the back of my neck a little bit of a stretch. Kind of like if you all can visualize a really big squash or melon hanging on a vine, just heavy on a vine. You want your head to feel like that. Just allow it to just hang heavy and have that your neck be that vine, allowing that weight to kind of gently tug on those muscles in the back of the neck. Then I know it seems like this is going to take longer than 10 seconds, but I assure you it's actually just 10 seconds. Then I roll my shoulders back and then I open up my chest, because I have a tendency to roll my shoulders, forward when I'm sitting in these video meetings. I roll my shoulders back, my fingers pointing to the wall, or in my case, the bookshelf behind me. I take a deep breath and I stretch these muscles here. And then I sigh really loudly and uncomfortably. And I make sure that my partner knows I do this 25 million times a day and I'm not hyperventilating. And I go, ah! And then I throw my glasses back on and then I hit start meeting and I go to the next one. That is my routine. It works for me. I've been doing it all. I've optimized this okay, for all of COVID, ladies, and it's worked like a charm, and I very much appreciate it. So it allows me to do kind of like it's like the most bang for your buck in a lot of different ways. I'm doing a little bit of movement, but it just kind of, when you're in back-to-backs, you still need to find time to do this. So the eyes closed is really a game changer. And of course, if you're an extrovert, schedule some social interaction, because we all know that that can increase your energy levels. Try to have it not be another Zoom call. I mean, actual, so like call someone on the phone, go walk around the block and call a friend or something, but schedule these. When I have really busy days, and I'm looking at my calendar, I'm like, oof, that's an all-day conference. ADC, for example, I actually strategically will schedule in 3 breaks throughout the course of the day that are about 10 to 15 minutes each, where I'm forcing myself to not scroll on my phone. So I will pre-schedule a phone call. I will text a friend and say, I'm going to call you around 3 o'clock on Wednesday, just for a couple of minutes for us to touch base about something. Why am I doing this? Because I don't trust myself, because I know come 2 o'clock on that Tuesday or 3 o'clock, if I'm exhausted, I'm in a conference all day, I've been in back-to-back calls all day, I am not going to do anything good for me. I'm going to end up just sitting there, scrolling on my phone or checking email and sending 2 more messages in the few precious minutes that I had to take a break. I'm not going to take a proper break. So I plan in advance for my own failure, and I embrace it, and it's okay. We're not perfect. We're not always going to do what's good for us. And so I schedule in advance ways in which I can, I tell my partner, let's go take a walk around I walk the dog. Like I'm going to do the dog walk, Wednesday afternoon, just as an FYI, like don't do it. I'm going to do it. And then I put myself in a position where I'm forced to go move my body, walk around outside, get some fresh air. And I promised you all a quick tip on caffeine. A couple of tips on caffeine. 1, if you're having coffee first thing in the morning, it's not useful. And we're unfortunately shooting ourselves in the foot. I know, I see a lot of sad faces. I'm sorry. I'm the bearer of bad news here. I love coffee. I'm a coffee snob. I get it. And I try to do decaf or half calf at first thing in the morning. The reason why you don't want to do it first thing when you wake up is because your brain and your body are making all of those good hormones to keep you alert and awake anyway. It just takes about 45 minutes or so to kick in. So if you wake up and you're groggy, it's normal, okay? Bear with your body, bear with your brain. You will feel more awake in about 45 minutes. Don't opt for the caffeine first thing. Wait. Caffeine is an amazing, powerful stimulant. It is awesome. But you want to make sure that you're minimizing the times that you're having it so it actually has an effect. Because if you have it first thing, you're sort of desensitizing yourself to it. You're starting yourself up on a super duper high, but naturally your body's going to come down to this baseline that's going to feel like fatigue all of a sudden. But it's not really fatigue. That's your normal self. It is not fatigue, but you don't want to get used to that high, super, super high, where it's your hormones plus the caffeine. You want to wait for those hormones to naturally dip. And you want to have caffeine about 20 minutes before that dip so you can smooth that dip out. So your dip doesn't go so low. And the best times to have caffeine on average, for the average person, is approximately 10 a.m. and approximately 1 p.m. Okay. If you have it sort of mid-morning, so really what I mean by that is mid-morning. So whenever that is for you, if you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be a little earlier. It'll be more like 9 a.m. But if you're waking up around the standard time, which is about 7 or so, then around 10 a.m. it will help you. So, you get started, you're working, we're all high octane. You wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you're go. It's been 3, maybe 4 hours. You're about to start, it's that pre-lunch dip. You're like starting to feel frazzled. You're like, oh my God, I need my lunch break. I'm feeling it. It's happening. You're having the caffeine then to kind of help you ride out that pre and during lunch slump. And then if you hit yourself with caffeine again around 1 to 2 p.m., then you're mitigating that afternoon slump that many of us also struggle with as well. Okay. Now, as you all can see on this slide, I'm also a huge proponent, if you do get the jitters, of incorporating something called L-theanine. L-theanine is an anxiolytic, which just means it physiologically lowers anxiety. And it comes from green tea. It's an extract from green tea. So if you just take out the anxiolytic properties from green tea and you leave all of the caffeine and the tein that exists inside of green tea, you just pull out the stuff that makes you calm and relaxed, you get L-theanine. L-theanine at a ratio of 100 milligrams of caffeine to 200 milligrams of L-theanine is a really nice way to have your coffee and to have a little bit of an energy boost, but it doesn't become super high jittery energy. And it helps you kind of smooth out that caffeine boost for about an hour or 2 after, as opposed to having a really sharp increase and then having a kind of a post-coffee slump, okay? L-theanine also, if you're just kind of high anxiety, can just be taken on its own as well. All right, now let's turn it over to you all. When should you / can you ideally be taking these breaks? And what are 2 things that we can really start doing to integrate to really manage energy throughout the day? And also feel free, Q&A as well. And someone already messaged me a question, and they were asking about naps. Naps are amazing. They're a huge performance booster. Multiple studies have been able to show, and especially if you've got, by the way, teenage kids or kids are about to go off to college, a really, really phenomenal opportunity to teach them this as well. You have a student who's taking a test, pre and post nap, they always score better on the post nap. And it can literally, and by the way, a power nap, so a nap that you take throughout the course of the day, is defined as 20 minutes long. No more than that. If you nap for more than 20 minutes, you're entering a sleep cycle, and that's when you like wake up and you feel like you've woken up on Mars, and it doesn't feel good. All right, so I will stop talking now. So who would like to take it away? Who has an immediate answer of either one of these questions?
Well, I would think that hydrating will force you to take more bathroom breaks, which gets you up and moving.
I love that, Liz. Yes, this is something that, at least in this space, we can sort of speak openly about. It is the amazing feedback loop of staying super hydrated, is that even if I want to keep sitting here and typing away and keep working, if I'm hydrating, I love that Katie's like drinking her water. I love that. Big water bottles for the win. Yeah, if you stay super hydrated, you're going to have to go to the restroom more and more often. And so it's this feedback loop. We have a scientist that I work down the hall from, and he has what he calls his bio break feedback loop. Every single time he gets up to go to the restroom, he actually fills a glass of water and drinks a small glass. It's not like a really, really tall glass, but he drinks his small glass of water every single time he goes to the restroom, because he cannot trust himself to remember to stay hydrated throughout the course of the day. It's the bathroom break that triggers him to drink a glass. But as Liz said it beautifully, you drink that glass right after you went to the bathroom, you're going to be going to the bathroom soon after anyway. So it's this wonderful feedback loop that helps him stay hydrated.
Hi everyone, I'm Ria. I lead the diabetes therapy team. This is my 2nd year at Close Concerns, and I'll be heading off to med school the end of the summer. I spent the day going through the ADA's massive schedule and trying to pick out the real world sessions on the therapy side. And so I put together a little mini guide, which you can click on in the chat. And I've just organized it into like the questions that I think could be potentially and partially answered by the real world data available at this year's meeting. So as Dr. Gabe mentioned, there's going to be a lot on how the current landscape of type 2 diabetes pharmacotherapies is changing and seeing how where the actual uptake is going. There's going to be a lot on incretins, in particular GLP-1s, so real world effectiveness of oral semaglutide, which could be really interesting. Once weekly semaglutide and dulaglutide versus semaglutide. A third question is, how does the real world effectiveness of GLP-1s and SGLT2 inhibitors compare, especially in regard to CV and renal health? We'll see some cool long-term outcomes data there. And then lastly, this is a little bit different and a bit of a plug for our sister organization, DQ&A, but there's some really cool data coming about the awareness of chronic kidney disease in people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And so that's the collection of things I'm looking forward to at this year's ADA.
Oh, that's so cool, Ria. Gosh, wow, thanks. I yet again always even thinking about that, how to kind of make that happen. I think the team has been just so strong in helping curate information and helping really identify these are things that might be especially interesting to different groups of people. We don't know yet. I don't think, actually, Diana, you might know. We're not positive, but one thing that has really moved us as a team, as we've had this whole massive health tragedy unfold, access actually to learning, and just to basically being able to see more things, and to see some things better. I was telling our team this morning about how we used to just run to these, football-sized fields of posters, and, on some level, it's like, okay, can we get to like 10? Can we get to these 10 that we know we want to see? And then where else are the crowds? And then, is there a way to actually ask Dr. Isaacs a question? But we really shouldn't do that because, we want all of the doctors there to be able to ask her questions, but just stuff like that is changing massively. So what we've noticed at many of the other meetings, and we don't know exactly yet how ADA will unfold this, but Diana, you can chime in if you do, but just the fact that at most of the meetings we've seen with all of the abstracts, you can pick the abstracts that you want online. So you can just search for it and then it's there and then you go there. And then in many cases, people have been given the opportunity to make not only a PowerPoint, my kids would say, can you say slides, make slides project and just put them up. And then we get to hear. And when you get to hear people talk about the work that they've done, there's just something really special and amazing about that. Diana, I don't know if ADA has said exactly how that will be. Do you happen to know, or does anyone else know maybe who's done a poster already?
I believe that you can record so that there is recording. I'm on a poster, but the first author recorded it, but I'm pretty sure you can record.
Yeah.
All I was told is that it's going to be very interactive, even more interactive than last year. So, but I think you make a really good point. I mean, when you go to the in-person posters, first of all, it's sometimes a bit awkward. You're trying to read someone's poster, but then they're staring at you. And so it's sometimes that's a little bit hard. So I think it is really nice. You can see so much more. You can see all the posters you want to. I do miss, sometimes that one-on-one interaction from walking through and seeing people in person. But I think you're right. We get to see so much more with it this way.
Yeah, I also am just thinking there are big randomized controlled trials that are going to be reported, like GRADE as an example, or one of the GLP-1s actually that didn't even go through development. We'll see some more on that as well. But GRADE might even make people kind of think differently about how do they assess how the patients are doing and different things like that. I know GRADE, we have waited, gosh, I don't know. I mean, literally, I suppose to say we waited forever isn't quite right, but we've waited for a really long time to see this. This has been GRADE is all about combination data and about how to basically see what is the next best therapy that is coming up. And I think that this is coming at a great time because even though the whole thing didn't use time in range as an endpoint, and there's a lot of different things swirling there, but CGM was a sub-study. And so being able to get even more information about combination therapy and after metformin, what's the next best therapy for people to go to, I think will be amazing. That's kind of they're calling it pragmatic clinical trial, and that's looking at the effectiveness of that. I don't know if any of you have thoughts about this, but CGM, seeing that being used more in trials or seeing that being used more in getting results. If you have any comments on it, feel free to share them. I think that I hope that it's finally time that the big outcomes trials that they don't move forward with at least some sub-study of CGM. I'm pretty biased. I'm pretty biased on it, but I think for all of our healthcare providers to have a better sense of what's likely in terms of hyperglycemia and severe hypoglycemia is really promising.
I'm not going to answer that, but I did just want to respond. I'm looking at our ADA poster and it's actually 5 slides. So it's totally a different format. And she said she was recording.
Oh, wow.
So I think,
Okay.
There's going to be a recording. It's going to be bigger and better. Yeah.
Which is amazing. I was also curious about, what Bob meant when he said that the exhibit hall was going to be even better. I don't know if you know anything about that, but we've experienced all sorts of different kinds of exhibit halls at Close Concerns in the last year and a half. And I wonder if people have thoughts as well about how some of that will be able to stay, so that there's kind of an exponential ability to increase access to all of this information.
Well, Kelly, this is Deb. So I can tell you that for our booth, to make it more interactive, we also have, we also have a product banner, but we have a learning bite, like mini product banner that's actually within the booth. So that was one of the options that we were given to just to generate more, so it's like maybe like 13 minutes long, and it's going to be really cool. So I would encourage you to go. So that's what we're doing. And I saw there's a couple of others that have these learning bites, so they took advantage of it as well.
Oh, it's really cool. Lisa, can you say more about what you mean about hosting some of the poster presenters together? Do you mean beforehand or after? I guess beforehand, and then make it into a thing that we can send out. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you did something like this and just picked a few of the posters, maybe even posters that are related to each other. One of the things they did at ATTD that was really interesting is they put together like two people that were working on apps. So if they were working on, vision apps that were related to each other, they kind of put them in the same talk. And then they asked them questions, your app does this and your app does that. Have you guys thought about working together? And I thought,
yeah.
I'm really sorry. Cool. I probably got some feedback. I apologize.
No, that's okay.
But just thinking about, getting different groups of people, maybe some new poster presenters and new researchers with some people that have been doing similar research. Yeah, I think it would be kind of a fun forum.
Yeah. Other comments about that. I really like that idea as well. I'm kind of thinking about like what night we could do that.
I really love opportunities like this to kind of like network with people. And that's probably what I miss most about some of the virtual formats, depending on the meeting. So yeah, I mean, I like that idea, right? If you've got similarities, similar interests, that would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Can I make another?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so one of the things I really enjoy about Medscape is that when you go, if you're a member of Medscape, then when they have a conference and you watch for it, then you get these really nice presentations that are just like blurbs where Medscape goes and they talk to these people about their new research. And then they talk to somebody else. But if you guys have this great forum where you're used to doing this, and you could have people, not necessarily competitors, but researchers.
Well, yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, like I mean, I don't know. It might be too. I don't know. Maybe
for next year.
Too Pollyannish. Oh well, now I'm like, I don't know. Could we start this tonight? I mean, it's really well. I mean, on some level, I mean, this is a Zoom breakout room, and for all of the stuff of like, oh gosh, like we didn't expect this, we didn't know we were gonna have this like weird kind of like ultra small delay, and I really appreciated that people were cool about it. But on the other hand, who knows what will be happening? Who knows what will be happening as the meetings advance? But I totally agree with you. And also, it's just a choice. It's just a choice that people have. I've been trying to, it's interesting. I've been trying to figure out how do we choose the ones of like the abstracts when we can do like what Diana was talking about, and we can listen to them, and then how do we spread the word on that? But this is it is a bit more organic. I could see doing this and getting some friends. So I don't know, Lisa, if I say to you, which ones would you like to listen to? Like, do you guys think doing it in a way that would be divided into maybe the way that, maybe just the way that ADA is dividing them all? I don't know. I'm sort of thinking about that, but that could be very organic. I mean, it could be a very small room like this.
Well, one of the things I like to do, I was in the not the mobile study, but the wisdom study. I worked in the wisdom study.
Yeah. Oh my God, thank you.
It was great. It was great. Anyway, so one of the things that I like to do is kind of try to manage the message, because the message is being managed by somebody. And so I feel like our message that needs to be managed right now is that CGM needs to be standard of care for everybody. And I think if you wanted to focus on something, I would say let's focus on that, because that's what needs to happen. And that's one of the things with the first wisdom article, that's what our goal was, is to basically say that, you know, however many hours a day, 4 or 5 hours a day below 54 is not acceptable. And these people don't know.
Yeah, I was actually just trying to pull from Close Concerns. I was just trying to pull a little summary of that study, but that was really like a lot of people were involved in that study that were not traditionally at the center of clinical trials. Is that fair to say it like that?
Yeah.
And seeing how and seeing what their experiences were. Yeah, I wonder. I know I'm getting this thing of, oh, we have to quit soon. But I do think it's a really interesting idea to do that under the idea of wild, or maybe just like that there is more real world data that is being propelled by new tools, including CGM, and then what are the experiences there. But I do love the idea of at least doing that around what are different populations that maybe that maybe haven't been highlighted as much or studied as much, and using CGM as the tool. Is that what you mean? But I don't know. I can just see all these. I can just say, I don't know. There's like basic.
Yeah, and I think Ria's list is really great, and I love Ria's list. But I'm not seeing CGM on this list, and I think real world and CGM are like.
Oh, we didn't. I mean, we didn't even actually. I mean, she is so Ria. My gosh, thank you. You're gonna be.
I don't think it's fair. I don't
no,
think
no,
we
well,
missed it.
so Lisa, so the reason why is because Ria runs therapy, and so we didn't do this in tech. We didn't even like think about it. But I love the idea of it. I think we could do that. You know, I think just knowing like there's what can CGM enable and where is CGM out there. But I think it's important also to be looking at studies where, so maybe there wasn't CGM and what else might have been possible. You know, we definitely believe CGM, you know, for everyone, whether it's like ongoing intermittent use, right? Like making sure you're using it once every 6 months or something to see that things are still on track. As we work toward being in a world, you know, where everyone can access it. I know that like there are still so many parts of the world, obviously, that don't even have BGM, right? So, and if they have free insulin, but they don't have BGM,
or they don't have any insulin,
we have to really think about those as well. And it's so great to have, you know, the leadership of all of your companies here and working on that, and to show people what is possible. So I like that idea. I think I think that we might talk to Karen and see what's possible, just as a like organic, hey, if you put together a poster and, you know, and if you care about this, if you would like to come. I don't know. I'm hesitating as I say that because it's not only up to me, but thank you. I'm so grateful for everybody coming here. We'll be sending you guys out. I don't know if anyone looked at it because probably a lot of people already had the Zoom links for today on their calendars, but today we got a lot more of the real world evidence, thinking about the background and all of that. I mean, my gosh, like Courtney's slides, thinking about all of the ways to consider the data and all of that. I was learning so much. So a lot of the follow-up information will be part of that. And the other breakout groups that are going on will have really good information as well. I think it'll be a couple weeks before we get the recorded parts of those, but we'll get the broader real world evidence out and in thinking about how we consider these studies. So thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you to our amazing associate team and to Rebecca for helping us put today together. We're so grateful.